Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 8. The Entered Apprentice Degree Continued. From Symbolism of the Three Degrees by Oliver Day Street, Part 1. The Entered Apprentice Degree. The square. The entered apprentice is taught that the square symbolizes mortality. Acting upon the square is a familiar metaphor for fair and honest dealings. A like symbolic meaning attaching to this tool has been traced in China, back 500 years before Christ. In the Great Learning, it is stated that abstaining from doing unto others what one would not they should do unto him is called the principle of acting on the square. In 1830, workmen engaged in rebuilding Babel Bridge near Limerick, Ireland, found beneath the foundation stone a metallic square bearing the date 1517 and also the following inscription: "I will strive to live with love and care upon the level by the square." This indicates strongly that medieval operative masons attached to the square the same symbolic meaning we do today. The level. The level is said to teach equality among us, not equality in mind or character or wealth or learning, not the equality of the communist or the anarchist, not even that all men and women are socially equal, for none of these things are true. Masonry does not profess the impossibility of making the weakest the equal in strength of the strongest, or the simpleton the intellectual equal of the genius, or the pervert the moral equal of the upright, or the outcast the social equal of the respectable people. It does not attempt to equalize wealth by taking from him who hath and given to him who hath not. The word equality has been greatly misunderstood, if not deliberately abused, in the fields of politics, business, industry, economics, and society. False and dangerous doctrines, policies, and systems have been founded upon it. The world is now witnessing the disastrous consequences of one of these false systems applied to Russia. To understand the meaning of this term equality, as used by us, we must go back to the days when society was divided into caste or classes. For example, the nobility, the clergy, the yeomen, the serfs, the slaves, in which each class enjoyed legal rights not given to a lower class, in which certain higher classes had the power of life or death over those of lower classes, in which social intercourse by an individual, however honorable, of a lower class, with those of a higher class was forbidden. It is artificial distinctions like these which we repudiate, but differences created by God or resulting from the conduct or efforts of the individuals themselves. Masonry does not profess to abrogate or obliterate. It could not if it would. It would not if it could. Masonry believes in every man having the just reward of his industry or his genius. It does not believe in arbitrarily rising the sluggard to the level of prosperity and material comfort enjoyed by the industrious. It does not thus set a premium on indolence. It does not believe in arbitrarily placing the man of no intellect or one who has neglected or refused to use his intellect on the same level with the man who by cultivation of his talents has greatly multiplied his powers of production. Masonry would not thus discourage the development of natural ability. On the contrary, Masonry, by its systems of degrees, from one of which the candidate cannot, at least theoretically, be advanced to a higher degree until by his own efforts he has mentally and morally fitted himself for the next degree, teaches a lesson that only by proficiency and efficiency does any man become entitled to advancement among his fellow men. How much of baseless and bitter discontent would disappear from among men, and what an impetus to labor and effort would be given if we could all be made thoroughly to understand this lesson. We are entitled to nothing that we do not earn. There is no excellence without great labor. God wisely made it so, and it is useless for us to kick against the pricks. The plumb. It is perfectly natural in a system where the tools of the operative builder are made to symbolize aspects of human conduct or character, that the plumbs should symbolize uprightness of life. This symbolism is very old, going at least back to the days of Manasseh, king of Judah, that is to say more than 700 years before Christ. Because of the sins of Manasseh, the Lord said, I will stretch over Jerusalem the line of Samaria and the plummet of the house of Ahab. 2 Kings 21:13. In the days of Isaiah the Lord declared, Judgment also will I lie to the line, and righteousness to the plummet. Isaiah 28:17. And in Zechariah 4:10, the word of the Lord is quoted as saying, They shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel. We introduce in our ceremonies a beautiful passage from Amos, with which we are all familiar and which being interpreted means that the Lord had been lenient with his people in the past, but without avail. He now proposed to set up in their midst a test of uprightness, a plumb line, and if his people failed to measure up to it, he would no more ignore their shortcomings, but would punish them righteously. Amos 7:7 and 8. Jacob's ladder. The ladder is, of course, an implement familiar to the builder. It was in constant use by our ancient operative brethren in a system where working tools are made to symbolize moral properties. It could scarcely happen otherwise than that the ladder would be made to typify the power or means by which man is lifted or attains to a higher state of existence. It was employed always with the same meaning in the ancient mysteries, and was a familiar symbol of salvation long before Jacob in his vision saw it extending from earth to heaven. We, as did the ancients, ascribe to it 7 rungs, symbolically with us of the 4 cardinal and 3 theological virtues, by which it was supposed a man was prepared for and elevated to the higher state. Situation of the lodge. The situation of lodges due east and west is not at all peculiar to Freemasonry. In ancient times, the custom was well nigh universal to locate sacred edifices east and west. This is why the tabernacle and Solomon's temple were so situated. This old idea of orientation, as it is called, is practically lost except among Masons. We preserve it in theory, even though necessity often compels us to depart from it in practice. The parallel between the lodge and the world holds good here as elsewhere, as the lodge is or should be situated east and west. So in ancient times was the world. The oblong square, which made up the ancient world, had its greatest length east and west. The point within the circle. There is but scanty and unsatisfactory explanation of this symbol given in our monitors, yet its deeper meanings are too vast and intricate to admit of discussion in a treatise like this. To it has been ascribed a phallic origin. It has been said to symbolize the universe, deity, fecundity, and the sun, the lodge, the master, and the wardens, not to mention other significances. We can only urge the Mason desiring knowledge on the subject to make research for himself. The parallel lines have been given several explanations not mentioned in our monitors, which the curious Mason will have to read for himself. They are said to have an astronomical or solar illusion. There is, however, a very practical symbolism assigned to them in our monitors. They are said to represent St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist, and it is on this I desire to enlarge a little beyond what our monitor says. St. John's days, June 24th and December 27th, are among American Masons the only festivals in the Masonic calendar. It matters little whether it be true that these men were members of our fraternity. They have been adopted by it as symbols. Although Masonry has existed from time immemorial and can boast of the great and good of every age and clime. Although philosophers and poets, patriots and heroes, statesmen and philanthropists have crowded its ranks, the high honor of annual commemoration has been conferred upon only 2 of its members. All the great kings and emperors, all the great soldiers and conquerors, all the great statesmen and patriots who in ages past have belonged to our beloved order, and of whom the order is justly proud, have been assigned to a position subordinate of these two modest patrons of the craft. It is not material, we repeat, to our present purpose, whether it be a historical fact that they were actually members of the fraternity. Its principles shone conspicuously in their lives and characters. It suffices here to say, in the language of a distinguished Irish Freemason, that there seems to be no doubt that the medieval fraternity acknowledged their patronage. Why is it that this man who wrote a raiment of camel's hair, and whose food was locusts and wild honey, and this man who was noted for his excessive modesty and avoidance of all display, these men who never engaged in any of the pomp and glory of the world, have been honored by Masons above all others? It is because Masonry regards not the exterior of a man, but also his internal qualifications. She bends not the suppliant knee at the shrine of wealth. Its glittering splendors are no passport of her altars and temples, and never has it been said of her that she turns her face away from him who is clothed in poverty's rags or veiled in poverty's tears. No worldly honors are there recognized. The King of England, the President of the United States, when he enters a lodge, is simply brother. He is there according no mark of distinction to which every other Master Mason is not entitled. Who enters a Masonic lodge leaves his titles, his wealth, his worldly honors at the door. Yes, we meet upon the level, though from every station come, the rich man from his mansion, the poor man from his home. For the rich must leave his hoarded gold outside our temple door, and the servant feels himself a man upon the mason's floor. He who wears the humble garb of domestic industry prepared by the hand of a devoted wife is as sure to gain admission and find as hearty welcome, and rank as high as he whose raiment is purple and fine linen, and who fares sumptuously every day. The St. John's possessed few of the external qualifications which attract the thoughtless crowd. They possessed all those internal elements that make the true man. Beyond all others, the principles of our fraternity shone forth in their character and daily lives, and for it Masonry has honored them above all others. We may and do have unworthy members, those who forget and violate their Masonic obligations. None of us indeed observe them as we should, but could stronger proof than the honor shown these two men be desired that Masonry as a whole regards excellence of character, the practice of virtue, the adoration of deity, and the love for our fellow men, the doing unto others as we would have them do unto us, above any wealth or worldly honors. If any still doubt, let them remember that the first three Grand Masters of Freemasonry were, according to tradition, Solomon, King of Israel, Hiram, King of Tyre, and Hiram Abith, that the memory of the last Hiram Abith, a poor widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali, and only a worker in brass and stone, is venerated among Masons far beyond his two royal associates. He lived a life of such piety and excellence that when the appointed time arrived, he welcomed the grim tyrant death. These are the lessons taught by this symbolism. These are the men whose example we should, as Masons, strive to emulate. These are the characters that we as Masons, imperfect as we are, love and venerate. Cardinal virtues. The cardinal virtues mean simply the preeminent or principal virtues. They were declared by Socrates and Plato 400 years before Christ, as they are by us today, to be temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. This list has been criticized as being arbitrary, as not covering the entire field, and as overlapping each other. In the light of the broadening influence of modern ethical and religious ideas, the justice of these criticisms must be conceded, but reflection would disclose to us that these four virtues cover a surprisingly large part of the moral realm of human life. Temperance means moderation, but not only in drink, but in diet. Not only in diet, but in action. Not only in action, but in speech. Not only in speech, but in thought. Not only in thought, but in feeling. It condemns excess of every kind, of our affections as well as our passions, of our feelings as well as our appetites. The libertine, the glutton, the gambler, the misser, the miser, and the profane swearer are all equally with the drunkard guilty of intemperance. Fortitude implies, it is true, a physical brevity that leads one to resist insult or attack with force, but more especially that moral courage that enables one, at the risk of incurring the snares of others, to refrain from a resort to violence, except when the necessity is imperative. When, however, this necessity arises, it is not deterred by pain or circumstance, be it ever so appalling or threatening. Prudence, as the critics have pointed out, enters to some extent into the last named virtue. It signifies also to meet every situation, however dangerous or difficult, with common sense and reason. It is a virtue which is lacking in a surprising large proportion of the human race. Little need be added to what is said of the virtue of justice in our monitors. It is truly the very cement and support of civil society. This concept of justice evidences a distinct advantage by mankind, to be able and willing to mete out exact justice to everyone, even oneself, in every relation of life, in thought, word, and action, very nearly sums up the total of all possible human virtue. In a system of moral philosophy, such as Plato's, as distinguished from a religious philosophy, such as we have here, justice very nearly covers the whole field. What a multitude of evils and mistakes the full possession and practice of these virtues would enable us to avoid. But with the birth and development of theology, the Platonic scheme seemed, and doubtless was, incomplete. It took little or no account of those higher speculative virtues which we class as religious. There was absent from it the conception of that charity or love which has entered so largely into modern sociological thoughts and movements. The latter philosophical and religious teachers therefore added to the cardinal virtues what they termed the theological virtues, namely faith, hope, and charity. These three were believed to include anything omitted from the other four, and together were supposed to cover the entire field of the moral thought and conduct of man. Masonic faith, it seems to me, is a very simple thing. We do not need to trouble with the refinements of the theologians, such as those of Avicenna, Maimonides, Ghazali, Judah Halevite, Averroes, Anselm, Abelard, Calvin, Albertus Magnus, Thomas Aquinas, William of Ockham, etc. We are not concerned with the Christian doctrine of justification by faith. Whether reason and the theologian's faith are in accord or at war with each other does not concern us. We attempt no decision between the nominalist and the Thomist. We do not have to reconcile or explain the rival theories of ontologism and psychologism and many other mystifying isms. We are dealing with something so simple it cannot be in conflict with anything that is true. Masonic faith means no more than confidence or trust in an all-wise, all-provident, and all-loving Creator. The Mason believes that with such a Father, no man who does his best has anything to fear either here or hereafter. It may be summed up in 10 words. If I do but my part, all will be well. But a faith like this might alone lead to a dark and cheerless fatalism. Hence, Masonry summons hope to lend her brightness and optimism to the prospect, while charity mellows and sweetens and softens all with love. Love of nature, love of the beautiful, love of the good, love of our fellow men, and love to God. Chalk, charcoal, and clay. We are told that entered apprentices should serve their masters with freedom, fervency, and zeal. With freedom, in that it should be done freely and with constraint as becomes a free man, not grudgingly and hesitantly as characterizes the slave, and with fervency and zeal. These two terms are synonymous. One is from the Latin, fervio, to boil, while the other is from the Greek, zeo, having the same meaning. We have been unable to find that chalk, charcoal, or clay anciently bore any symbolic significations. It must, however, be admitted that chalk is a fitting symbol of freedom, charcoal of fervency, and earth of zeal. Northeast corner. From the most ancient times, it has been the custom of builders to lay with ceremonies the cornerstones of important edifices, as it was a custom of the ancients to orient their temples, that is, to make them face the east. So, for some similar reason, it was their custom to lay the cornerstone in the northeast corner. Why this particular part of the structure was chosen has been the subject of much speculation. Some have attributed it to the fact that the rising sun sheds its beams more directly upon this corner of the building, situated due east and west, than upon either of the other corners. But many have supposed, and no doubt truly, that a symbolical reason existed for this custom. This also has given rise to further speculation, and as a specimen we introduce this interesting conjecture by General Albert Pike. The Apprentice represents the Aryan race in its original home on the highlands of Pamir, in the north of that Asia termed Orient, at the angle Whence, upon two great lines of immigration south and west, they flowed forth in successive waves to conquer and colonize the world. As speculative masonry gradually developed from operative masonry, it preserved this ceremony of laying the cornerstone because of the moral and religious symbolism which seems always to have pertained to it. With the operative, it was a serious part of the actual process of building. With us, its chief value lies in its symbolical significations, as placing the newly made inner apprentice in the northeast corner of the lodge marks the completion of his initiation, so it symbolizes the completion of the preparatory period of his life and his readiness to enter upon its serious labors in business. The admonition there given him is that having made proper moral preparation for life, his future activities should be kept in accord with the teaching and training he had received in his youth. The Brethren briefly reviews the symbolical teachings of the ceremonies of initiation. As said at the outset, we have barely touched upon them. Any one of them would be sufficient of itself to occupy a whole evening. We could easily consume another hour talking to you about the symbolical teachings of the entered apprentice lesson without exhausting it. Let us illustrate with two questions and their answers. Whence came you? Daily this question is asked by Masons without the slightest thought as to its real meaning. The answer we may make to it in the lodge is well nigh unintelligible, yet about as intelligible as any ever given it, or whichever will be given it. Who can answer the question, whence came you? Who has ever answered it? Who will ever answer it? Equally baffling and profound is that companion question, familiar in some jurisdictions. Whither are you bound? Equally an enigma is the answer we give it. Simple as these questions appear, they search every nook and cranny and sound every depth of every philosophy, every mythology, every theology, and every religion that has ever been propounded, anywhere, by anybody at any time to explain human life. They allude to the problems of the origin and destiny of mankind. They lie at the foundation of all the thinking and of all the activities of man, except such as are concerned with the purely utilitarian question. What shall we eat, and wherewithal shall we be clothed? All our better impulses, all our loftier aspirations, all our faith, all our longing for and striving after a nobler state of existence, either in this or a future life, are but attempts to answer these two questions. They are the supreme questions which men have been asking themselves and each other ever since men were able to think and to talk. And they are the questions which men will continue to ask oftenest and most anxiously until the time when we are promised that we shall know, even as we are known. What came we here to do? If we came, we know not whence, and are bound, we know not whither. Then naturally the next questions are, why came we here? What came we here to do? What is man's mission in this life? If we cannot fathom the past nor descry the future, maybe we can solve the present. This question, however, is no less baffling and profound than the other two. If they have reference to the origin and destiny of man, this one has to do with the riddle of his present existence. Again, we are met with the same inscrutable mystery. The three age-long questions, whence, why, whither. Press again for answer. And what a simple and significant answer do we give this question? Does the Mason proudly answer like the Pharisee? I am here to teach and instruct others. I am here to lead and reform others. I am here to relieve and assist others. Not at all. With equal nobility and humility, he answers in substance that, conscious of his own weakness, feeling the need of help from others rather than an ability to give help, his first duty is to improve himself and to subdue his own passions, to cast the beam out of his own eye before undertaking to remove the mote from his brother's eye. To an intelligent creature, ignorant of both his origin and his destiny, what more obvious duty could there be than the cultivation and development of his own mental, moral, and physical faculties? Self-subjugation and self-improvement, here alone lies before him a sure path. If he sets himself earnestly to the task of ridding himself of his own evil passions and improving himself by adding the desirable virtues, error in the larger sense is impossible. Nor is this a narrow or selfish task he sets himself, that of chastening and of improving himself. For, lo, before he has proceeded far with this task of self-improvement, the divesting himself of all that is low or evil or base, and the setting of himself to the cultivation of those virtues that truly lend to his own improvement, he finds that they also involve the doing of good to others. We commend this question and answer to those well-meaning brethren who are all the time bemoaning that Freemasonry does not become the champion of all the uplift and reform movements of the day. It will be noted that in this question and answer, not a word is said about uplifting or reforming or improving others. It is always myself. This is an implied admission that I need improvement quite as much as others, that it is presumptuous to pretend to lead and teach others until I myself am thoroughly prepared. It should never be forgotten that Masonry is not a reform society. It is not a relief society. Its original and primary purpose was and still is to take men who are already good and true, and, building on that foundation, to make of them men of such perfect minds and characters as will encourage others to follow in their footsteps. The influences it has thus silently wielded upon the political, religious, mental, and moral development of mankind can never be known. Such things do not find record upon the pages of history. We can only surmise by looking back and observing how many of those who have shaped the religious, political, and social progress of the world in the last 200 years have been members of the craft. Many centuries ago, Omar Khayyam struggled with these three questions thus: with them the seed of wisdom did I sow, and with mine own hand wrought to make it grow. And this was all the harvest that I reaped. I came like water, and like wind I go into this universe, and why not knowing, nor whence like water willy-nilly flowing, and out of it as wind along the waste, I know not whither willy-nilly blowing. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.